Now that the dust has settled, what does Michigan football look like in terms of roster next year? We're going to get all the way through that right here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday. We're back and doing it. We're on the road going to the Michigan basketball game. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today's Sports Media Group. Thank you to all of you out there for making us your first listen, and thank you to all of our everydayers. Do appreciate you in every single way, especially all on the Discord. Not even just the everydayers that listen to the show every day or watch the show every day. Those of you who are that engaged, love it. We're going to go offense, defense, and then general overall view as we talk about Michigan football coming off of the transfer portal haul. Yes, it is possible they still add some pieces. Do I think any of them are going to be particularly consequential? Probably not. Probably not. So you're going along with me for the ride, literally and figuratively, as we get into all of that. So let's start with offense. We will work our way through, and basically I'll give breakdowns of every position group and where it stands, my confidence in it, the additions and all of that, and then kind of give you my starting lineup as I see it today, which certainly can change, will change, and will certainly be wrong at some point. But start with the quarterback situation. Obviously, we knew that Bryce Underwood was the kingpin, the linchpin, however you want to look at it. He was the central figure as far as that's concerned. He was the chief person in terms of retention. Kyle Whittingham made it his focus. The only player that was mentioned in the introductory press conference. So you knew that he was going to be more than a central figure here, and he was the fourth person that was announced as being retained. So that is good news straight away that they managed to retain Bryce Underwood. They also retained his classmate in 2025, Chase Herbstreit, and brought in two freshmen in Brady Smigel and Tommy Carr. But they also added two more names to the group in Colin Hurley and Braden Fowler-Nicolosi. Now there's at least, again, a little bit of an insurance plan with Fowler-Nicolosi. And Colin Hurley, but that's, I still think, slightly more of a development piece. But now this feels like, okay, there can be competition. That's not saying Bryce is going to lose the job, and I know I was asked the question, if he loses, he's not. That's just not happening. But I think the most important thing is that he has some people to push him, and I think that they've done a really good job with that room to get him to that spot. So that's where they're at now, is they have people who can push Bryce Underwood, and we know who that is going to be as far as the starter going forward. Up next, let's go to the offensive line. This is a really intriguing position group in my estimation, because you've got now, I think, what feels like a good 10 deep right now. And I think that the last 2 years they've talked about that being a possibility without it actually being a reality. So now you've got about 10 guys that I feel like could be in as a starter type at any point, which I think is really crucial for this upcoming season. And then on top of it, you've got someone in Jim Harding who is known as being an elite offensive line coach, which should help elevate the room as a whole as well. So ultimately, you start off with having it's hard for me to pick a starting five, so right now I'll just list a bunch of the players that I think are going to be in that group, or at least maybe on the periphery to some degree. But I think you're looking at Andrew Babalola, Jake Guarnera. You're looking at Andrew Sprague, Blake Frazier. And now my mind's blanking because they've certainly got more than that. Native Phobie, Avery Gash, they've got so many players that I think Evan Link that can be a part of this. Maybe it's not fully a 10 deep, but it's pretty close. And they bolstered the room with Houston Kaina Torres from Nebraska. Just adding a second-year guy who's already a behemoth, already kind of ready to go. And then they'll be adding freshmen in Malachi Lee, Adrian Hamilton, and a couple others that I think could play really big roles. Maybe not this year, but certainly next. But you got to like what they've got with the offensive line. I think that, so now we're talking two position groups, quarterback and offensive line. Both of those, I think, went up in ability, capability. And I think that also by having Coy Detmer Jr. as your coach at quarterback and Jim Harding at offensive line, again, the arrow is pointing up for both of them. So that's huge. Okay, so from there, we'll go to tight end, where there were no meaningful additions. And obviously, there were some subtractions. And they even lost someone in the transfer portal. They were actually released from their NIL, more so than the transfer portal, in Matt Ludwig, who ended up going to Texas Tech. But and they lost Marlon Klein to the NFL. But you've still got a lot of promise because you're getting Hogan Hansen back. And if he's healthy, I mean, that changes the game in a lot of ways. So, number one, that's big. Zach Marshall, Deacon Tonielli, Jalen Hoffman, and Eli Owens. I feel like these are all guys that could absolutely contribute. I mean, we saw most of those guys contribute last year. And we've seen a lot of them get better. Like, there was a point last year where I felt like Zach Marshall and Deacon Tonielli were more reliable than Marlon Klein. And that says a lot about what those guys were able to do and how they were able to grow. And it's going to be interesting seeing Freddie Whittingham overseeing that position and what that looks like. Running back. The way I look at this is, would you trade a room that essentially you're going in with two guys that you said, Justice Haynes, Jordan Marshall, Law and Order, this looks like this could be really good. Would you trade that for Jordan Marshall, Taylor Tatum, Savion Hyder? You still got Micah Kapana. You've still got some other guys. You do lose Jasper Parker. But at this point, Bryson Cosdall is nowhere. He didn't transfer anywhere at this point. I still think that you would trade that because now it feels more like a three-headed monster. And I know Taylor Tatum, kind of a year removed from doing anything, but like has all the talent in the world. Certainly, when he's healthy, could absolutely be a factor. And, Savion Hyder is going to see the field sooner than later. And you hope that you don't get into the injury issues that you had last year. Retaining Tony Alford, that's good news. So you got to love that. Okay. Wide receiver, got to finish out there. I mean, completely different looking room in a lot of ways. You're going into the year knowing that Andrew Marsh is your main guy. Last year, you were going into the year thinking Donovan McCulley was, but you finished with Andrew Marsh being your main guy. So now you got a second-year guy that's shown all the promise in the world. You add J.J. Buchanan, who can also moonlight at tight end. You add Jamie French. And you've still got like some promising young players. Jamar Browder. You got the freshman Travis Johnson. Jalen Piles coming with him as well. And Marion Stewart, if he's healthy. Channing Goodwin, Kendrick Bell. I mean, that was an incredible catch by Kendrick Bell in the bowl game. So suddenly, that went from feeling like it was a liability to feeling like that might be a strength. I think you can't underplay the additions either. Like, it feels like there's going to be a lot of positive when it comes to being able to give Bryce Underwood the ability to have some targets that he can be able to hit. Now, you couple all of this not just with Micah Simon taking over the position, but Jason Beck taking over the offensive coordinator role. This still feels like it's going to be relatively run-heavy. But on top of that, I feel like it's going to be more efficient in a lot of ways, more creative. Not that Chip Lindsey's wasn't creative. I think he was. I was wrong, and a lot of you were right in that I feel like he was being handcuffed a bit by Sharon Moore. So that kind of changed a lot of what the thought was with a lot of that. So I think that's going to be really interesting to see what that pass game looks like. So if I was to name a starting lineup now, it'd be Bryce Underwood at quarterback, Jordan Marshall at running back. We're going to go 3 receivers. We'll go Andrew Marsh, J.J. Buchanan, and Jamie French. 1 tight end, I'll go with Hogan Hansen. Offensive line, I will go with Andrew Babalola, Evan Link, Jake Guarnera, Andrew Sprague, Blake Frazier. Actually, no, Blake Frazier on the left side, Andrew Babalola on the right. That's what I meant. So that would be what I would go with at this juncture. What about the defense? We've got to get into that. Plenty to get into there, maybe more concerns, but we will do that here in just a moment. But before we do, the college football season is now done for 2025. Kaput. It's congratulations to Indiana for winning the national championship. But now is the time to start thinking about what games you're going to go to in 2026. It's going to be here before you know it. I know, it just ended yesterday. And with all of the different things that can be inhibitors, the endless queues and different fees and all of that, you can skip all that by going to Gametime. Now, here's the great thing about Gametime. So many amazing parts of it. Whether you're looking at the views from your seat, you can see exactly what you're seeing, the no hidden fees, the fact that you can do the zone deals. You know, you pick the area you want to sit in, Gametime picks the seats, and you save huge. There are all kinds of perks to Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets and go to Gametime today. Download that app. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's Gametime with the code LOCKEDONCollege. Download Gametime today. All right, if you're watching, I've got my camera stabilizer on. It's on. I'm using the big camera since we're going to basketball. Could have charged the little camera. I'm probably not bouncing around, but you know, that's where we're at. Got to add thank you to all of you for making Locked On Wolverines your first listen. But if you want to dig in deeper, you want a little bit more. You know, there's multiple things you can do, and it all is under the umbrella of the Everydayer Club. Listen, you want ad-free? You know, you don't want to hear me fumbling around with words beyond what you already hear. You know, you want to limit your exposure? That's there for you. I'll tell you what, the Discord access is where it's at. Because you can ask me anything, I will answer it as openly and honestly as I can. Not saying that I don't do that on the show, but a little different when you're behind a paywall. So, saying all kinds of stuff in there. Plus, the camaraderie of being show listeners and all of that, that's all in there as well. So, check that out. Go to LockedOnWolverines.supercast.com or check the show notes for more to join the Everydayer Club. It's $5 a month or $50 a year, depending on how you want to do it. All right, so defense. Now led by Jay Hill. A little bit more man coverage than probably we've gotten accustomed to seeing in the last few years. I would liken it to probably end up looking a lot more like the Mike McDonald led. And I think in a lot of ways. In terms of scheme and everything. Part of me is spitballing. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Part of me is spitballing because we don't really know. But that would be what I would start with. But then beyond that, let's start with the lines. So let's start with the interior. Not a lot of bodies there, but you've got essentially at least a 3-man rotation. And I'm sure they're going to get to 4 or 5. So you've got Jonah Laia, the transfer from Utah. You've got Trey Pierce and Enoetta. And then I think you're going to see 1 or 2 other guys emerge. 3rd-year David Pale, 2nd-year Benny Patterson, 2nd-year any number of guys. Travis Moten or Ted Hammond's in his 3rd year. You've got, why am I blanking? Bobby Kenka is the other one. They've got talent to work with, right? Unproven beyond those 3. And you still want to see those 3 take a step forward. So I'm curious to see what that ends up looking like. Lou Esposito continuing to coach that group. So he already knows what he's got. But there's also fresh eyes in and around him, whether it be Lewis Powell at edges, whether it be Jay Hill up at the top. I think you can make that work. But they're really going to need, I think, because they got accustomed to having just unbelievable talent in the middle with Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant. Obviously, last year wasn't that. A big step down from that. I think because of that, though, you are going to really need those edges to step forward. I kind of liken this to maybe 21. 21, they obviously had Aiden and eventually Ojabo. Ojabo didn't really start showing out until week 5. But 2022, it was kind of the opposite. They had really good, it was solid interior play, but you know what? Mason Graham, Chris Jenkins, that wasn't necessarily like, I got to tell my grandkids about this type of thing. It was good. And I think they can be that on the interior. On the exterior, you bring in John Henry Daely, who ruptured his Achilles to end the season last year. You hope that he can be good to go and somewhat close to form, if not in full form, by the time the season comes around. That's a big ask, but we'll see. And then you've got a lot of young talent. Now, you know that Cam Brandt's probably going to be heavily involved here. Then you've got Dom Nichols and Nate Marshall, Lugard Adekpayi, and then I'll be interested to see Carter Meadows. Going back to the interior, I would be interested to see what Titan Davis and Alistair Vallejo will be able to do in year 1. I would not be surprised to see either of them get involved relatively early and start to make an early impact in year 1. That would not surprise me in the least. So we'll see if that ends up coming to fruition. But and then as far as others, kind of feel like that's really the group that we're working from right now. So that's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do up front. Linebacker is a little bit more curious. Now, the good news is running a 4-2-5, you really only need 2 guys. But, you lost your top 4. So that kind of changes things, and it's not exactly the most comfortable situation to be in. Now, they obviously added a bunch of guys to the group via the transfer portal. I'm most excited about Nate Staehling. I would not be surprised if Max Alford or AC Moa end up being better than people think just because they have the familiarity with the system. And they also brought in Christian Pierce. So they brought in 4 guys at the linebacker room to replace the other 4, but no one's really as high up as, say, Cole Sullivan was. But I've said this before, it's worth mentioning again. Jay Hill's top tacklers each of the last 2 years at BYU were sophomore linebackers. So you look at that and you say, all right, Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, Chase Taylor, it's your turn to step it up. Troy Bowles, you're still going to be involved. That's pretty much the room, though. Like, I unless I'm missing somebody, and I know they've got some freshmen coming in, like Markel Dabney, right? Like, linebacker recruiting was not computing the way that they had hoped. They'd really wanted, like, the main guy that they really wanted was Braden Rouse, who ended up going to Tennessee. And it just didn't seem like they were ever really in it for any of their top targets. So that kind of became a problem. So that'll be curious. But I think the good news is the back end feels really good. I disagree with the mothership at USA Today when they question the defensive backfield, because I think you've got Nicholas Snowden, who they brought in from Utah. Then you've got your 2 returning corners, Jyaire Hill and Zeke Berry, still returning. Rod Moore, assuming he's healthy. And listen, I'm more optimistic than I think some of you. I got some weird DMs of like, you idiot. Hammond, you idiot. How dare you think that Rod Moore could be healthy? One person said, unless he has surgery. Like, I mean, that's possible, right? So, I mean, I think Rod Moore, and then you still have Mason Curtis. You've got, you brought in Chris Bracey, and you still managed to get Jordan Young back as well. With corner, you still also have Shamari Earls and Josiah Edmond. So I think there's a lot to like. Now, it's not all full experience, but remember, this was a group that last year, wide receiver and cornerback were the 2 places we felt the least confident. Now I'd say it's linebacker. So where last year linebacker, I think I felt the most confident. So it's interesting to have that little bit of a trade-off. They were really confident in the front 7 last year, and it didn't necessarily, I mean, nothing defensively was like lockdown. But I will be very curious to see what this looks like under Jay Hill. So if I had to pick a starting lineup right now, it would look like this. It would be, I'll keep Jonah Laia as a starter, and I'll have him with Trey Pierce. I think the third will be Enoeta. Then the edges, we're going to say John Henry Daly is healthy enough to play Is he as effective as he was? I don't know. And I'll keep Cam Brandt there. I think Dom Nichols would be the next guy to come in there. For my linebackers, I've got Troy Bowles and Nathaniel Owusu Boateng, Smith Snowden as your nickel, Rod Moore and Chris Bracey as your starting safeties. And then I'll keep with Zeke Berry and Jyaire Hill. So that's that. And obviously they also special teams. They've got a whole new battery there between the long snapper. They've got 2 long snappers in from the portal. They got a kicker. They got a punter. I think that's going to be really good. So overall, what are my thoughts? And I want to also mention some names that maybe weren't mentioned that I think could play an impact. And I think you can guess the name that I'm going to mention here. We'll do that here in just a moment. All right, so we're doing it on the drive. It's knowing I had a night. It's like, okay, what better way to do the podcast than to do it on the road? I was up pretty late last night trying to chase the Northern Lights. Didn't work out the way I had hoped. Think all the fireworks started a couple hours later. And I'm kind of wondering with the way the sunset looks if we're still kind of getting some residual effects of it, because it's pretty incredible sunset right now. Listen, I do a lot of sunset photography and stuff of the like. Astrophotography, sunset photography, all of that stuff. But figured, let's knock this out on the way to the game. Hopefully get it up in time so you can go right from the show to the game, maybe after the game, depending on how you feel about it. But overall, I think the offense is going to be ahead of the defense for the first time in, 2011? I mean, actually, in 2011, the defense was pretty good. Greg Madison. So 2010, maybe? First time that I think that we can look at it and say, okay, this offense should be... I mean, 2011, the offense was still pretty good. It just maybe wasn't quite what it was the year before, maybe. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think the good news offensively is, like, it feels like the line should be strong. You've got skill position players everywhere. The player that I kind of teased coming out of the last segment that I'm really curious to see is Celeste Moa. And the reason I didn't add him anywhere was because while I think he'll get his start at wide receiver, you could play him on the back end. You might not have the necessity of doing so yet. And you might be looking at, like, okay, we just got to get the ball in this guy's hands more so in year one and let him cook, let him do his thing. And I think that would be really interesting. But overall, I think when you've got Jason Beck and these players and everything, and you got a coach that obviously wants Jason Beck to do what Jason Beck does, not hamstring him, not necessarily, yes, they will play complementary football. Kyle Whittingham does that, but he also is, like, trying to win games and not in, like, the most, like, we'll do the absolute basic to do it. Like, I think that is going to bode really well, especially because, like, you really want to showcase Bryce Underwood and these guys, right? Like, you really want to, because if you don't, then what are you working with the next year? I love people, by the way, on the road that just brake for no reason. Let's just go 10 miles an hour under the speed limit with no one in front of me for no reason. Okay. All right, I'm done complaining about traffic. And now he's back up to, crime in the left lane. Make that make sense. Anyway, it's I just think that the offense is certainly going to be ahead, but, like, I mean, Utah has tended to have pretty good defenses, and I know Jay Hill is coming from BYU. Again, like, when I look at the coaching staff and everything, like, there wasn't a single coach that was that Michigan's bringing in that was not lamented as a loss by the fan base that was losing them, whether it be BYU or Utah or Marquez Hagans at Penn State or Stockton from Boise State, right? Like, Gennaro Guilford from BYU is very highly thought of. So I think it's going to be really interesting because I just, like, these guys all have done more with less. And I'm just going to keep hammering that home until we see it. Because I firmly believe that we're going to get to a space here in the season and we're all going to look at it and say, I cannot believe how much better that looks. So they still got a lot of depth, even in the places where it's like, okay, it's unproven. Unproven doesn't mean untalented, right? Okay, Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng and Chase Taylor are somewhat unproven. But you know what they did? They got out there a lot last year. That's going to pay huge dividends, right? Like, so as much as you want like that difference maker, you want that starting caliber linebacker from the portal because that just gives you that much more oomph. Like, that doesn't mean that what they've got can't do it. And if John Henry Daly is healthy, I mean, that really changes the calculus on defense. If Jamie French turns out to be, like, he's relatively inexperienced, people are excited about him, maybe more so than they are Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng on the other side of the ball. Because, hey, kind of in the Barney from Barney Stinson, newer is always better, like, I think that ends up being kind of a little bit of a mantra for some. And I think that you're going to see that the development piece is going to work a lot better in Ann Arbor. Like, development was very good under Jim Harbaugh in when it came to the lower, the Mikey Sainer stills ended up turning out, right? But you kind of didn't always know what you were going to get with the 5 stars. I feel like you're going to see more across the board development with this group. So I'm excited to see that. And I just think that it's going to be, it's going to be really interesting to see. And it's unfortunate that we're in January 20th today. We got a long ways to go until like a couple months we'll get to start seeing some of it, spring game and all of that. But you know what? If everyone's all in, we've seen in Ann Arbor what that looks like. We just saw in Bloomington what that looks like. Getting everyone to buy in, and it sounds like they really had to make sure that they were getting everyone to buy in, and that's why you saw transfer portals and then coming back. I think that that's going to be really interesting to see. But, all right, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will be back on Wednesday. Peace.